So we're going to come back to these nutrients. I want to move forward in this now and again talk about some additional immune suppressing behaviors. Now, we mentioned or briefly chatted on a few of these things a minute ago. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at immune suppressing behaviors. So I mentioned a minute ago, you need exercise, but you know, there's also something as too much exercise. So some people actually can take this too far, and excessive exercise, meaning doing too much. If you've ever worked out and you couldn't walk the next day, you were so sore, now's not the time really to attempt those major types of workouts, you know, unless you're already in phenomenally good shape. If you're just trying to get into it, start light and work your way to more, but be very cautious here because too much exercise, exercising too frequently, overtraining can actually suppress your immune system as well. So we don't want to get, you know, it's important exercise, but too much can also be a problem. Smoking and cigarette smoke. Now, some of you don't smoke, but maybe you're in California and so you're around a lot of the wildfires right now that are happening. And so, you know, how do you protect yourself there? Well, you know, depending on where you live and just how aggressive it is, one of the best things that you can make sure that you have set up is HEPA air filtration to protect your air as much as possible. I mean, we can't always control the external air, but we can certainly filter it, and we can control who we hang out with. And so, you know, again, smoking, everybody knows. I don't think I'm like making any new major headway or grounds into the unknown charters of the world when I say smoking is bad for you. At this point in our history and in our time, most of you know this. So bad idea here, but it's not just smoking too. Many people are vaping now, and a lot of those chemicals in those vape devices are immunosuppressants, as well as the chemicals. The chemicals that you're being exposed to, many of them basically remember you're going straight into the lung with these things. So your immune system, a good part of your immune system is behind your lungs. It's there to protect you from what you breathe in. And when it's chemicals coming in, that's a bad thing. And so vaping has become more popular in place of cigarette smoking. It's not something I would encourage. A lot of these things that we're finding are much, much more toxic and different, just in different ways. And then alcohol. Alcohol is one, again, you know, sometimes when we're under stress, right? We're under stress. We need some kind of relief from that stress. A lot of people turn to food, but some people turn to alcohol. It kind of gives them kind of a moment of reprieve from the stress. And, you know, some would argue that, hey, you know what? That occasional drink to relieve me of that stress is actually therapeutic, considering how bad the stress is. I would just say, it's not alcohol here or there that's going to create the problem for you. It's the daily, regular use of alcohol that's going to create problems. And I even, you know, some of you, you know, we've talked about this before, where, you know, some of you say, I only drink one glass of wine. That's regular use if you do it every day. Okay, one glass of wine a day causes immune suppression. One glass of wine a day is not healthy. It's not good for you. I don't care what you've been told or what TV commercials you've seen about how great red wine polyphenols are for your antioxidant function. Alcohol is an immune suppressant and it's a diuretic, so it causes you to pee out more of your vitamins, more of your nutrients. And as I showed you earlier, nutrients are the cornerstone and the foundation for the healthy function of your immune system. So we don't want to take in things consistently or aggressively that could deplete us of our nutritional status. Another big one here, it's not on the board, but it's excessive coffee, too much caffeine. Really, it's not even just coffee, but it's just too much caffeine in general. Now, caffeine is a diuretic as well, so it will deplete you of nutrients. But if you're having like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee a day, that's not really what I would call aggressive caffeine use. When you get over 150 milligrams a day of caffeine, you're going to start getting into trouble. This is where people get into trouble. The average regular sized cup of coffee is about 120. So a cup of coffee equals 120. It's when you go to those big cups, you know, some of those coffee chains, you know, they use fancy Italian names, but, you know, it's not the standard cup, your 6-ounce cup. It's like a 26-ounce cup, and so you're getting a caffeine bomb, and most of these things are loaded with artificial sweeteners and they're also loaded with sugar and dairy and other types of filler ingredients. I always say that coffee, most people don't really like coffee. They like all the garbage that people put in it, right? So coffee is just, for most people, it's a sugar and dairy delivery system. But 1 cup a day of caffeine, that caffeine is 120. You start getting over that, you start getting into heavier diuretic components, which means nutrient loss. But one of the other things that we've seen with people, especially with autoimmune disease, with aggressive caffeine use, is we see GI damage. And GI damage, meaning irritation to the lining of the stomach and the intestines, that can actually contribute to malnutrition as well. So you got to be careful, again, with the overconsumption, with the aggressive consumption of caffeine as well as alcohol. So just be cautious around those, because those will be major problems for you if you're not. The other thing I wanted to talk about was some of the medications that can actually suppress the immune system or alter the immune system. And so a few of the common categories, one is the steroid. Steroids are notorious for immune suppression, but they also cause a reduction of vitamin D. Okay, they deplete vitamin D, they deplete calcium, they can deplete magnesium, and they can deplete vitamin C. So be aware that if you're on a steroid chronically, these nutrients you should be paying particular attention to, especially the vitamin D, because of its role with immune system function. We actually know that vitamin D is a major immune regulator, and when it's low, especially when it's below 50, you really can get in trouble with infections, with colds, flus, etc. So vitamin D, very important if you're on a long-term steroid, making sure that your doctor's measuring these things for you. And you might probably consider supplementing with these things as well, as long as you're on a drug like that, because again, the natural course is for those things to be depleted the longer you're on it. Allergy medicines, and we're talking about things like antihistamines. What a lot of these do is they suppress stomach acid. Now, stomach acid is a primary immune barrier. Stomach acid helps kill microbes that you eat. When we eat our food, there's viruses and bacteria and fungi and parasitic microorganisms in the food, even the most organic, healthy food in the world. Part of our stomach acid's job is to destroy things as they come in. So it's part of our immune system. It's also part of our digestion, right? So not only is it part of our immune barrier, but it's also part of how we digest nutrients, particularly protein. You require acid to absorb and digest protein, but also minerals. Many of our minerals, specifically zinc, requires acid. Selenium requires acid to be absorbed. Calcium and magnesium require acid to be absorbed. So again, when you're taking allergy medicines that impact stomach acid production, not only are you weakening one of your immune barriers directly, but you're indirectly causing potential malnutrition that can lead to weakening of your immune system. Now, there's again, on that same note, we could add antacids on this list as well if we really wanted to, as a medicine that could affect or impact the immune system. But the other thing that allergy medicines do overall is that what do? They suppress different immune chemicals to reduce your allergy response. Well, again, if you're doing this chronically long term, kind of the key to whether or not you have an allergy or whether you have a chronic illness, if you have to take allergy medicine year round because you're chronically suffering with allergy symptoms, you have a food problem and a behavior problem more than you have an allergy problem. And so many times when people come in to see me, we start looking at food and other behavioral change modifications. What we typically find is those ones that are taking chronic allergy medicines no longer need them once we change their diet. In essence, they're not really struggling from outdoor or external allergies. They're struggling from an immune system that's so overwhelmed by food that they're suppressing parts of their immune system, because of the reactions that are occurring in their body. So the sneezing, the itching, the snot, the watery, teary, all that kind of stuff that most people equate to chronic allergies is really, again, probably you're just poisoning yourself with food, and it's just poisoning you slow enough to create the perception that you have chronic allergies, and the allergy medicine suppresses your immune system to mask the symptoms well enough, again, to increase your risk of developing infection. Not a good idea long term. And then there's antibiotics. Now, if you've got an infection and your doctor's prescribed you antibiotics, I'm not saying don't take your antibiotic, and I'm not saying that all antibiotics are bad, but what I'm saying is that the broad spectrum use of antibiotics ubiquitously everywhere, right? We've used antibiotics in our food supply, in our food chain, in our meats. We use different kinds of antibiotics to clean the water. So like, most city water in the tap contains chlorine and bromine and other chemicals that have that are antibiotic in nature. There's pesticide runoff in our water. There's pesticides in our food. These things act as antibiotics. And so again, if you're not eating organically, or if you're exposing yourself to frequent chronic antibiotic use because your immune system is so weak it can't fight infection, then you're going to set the stage for, for the potential for bigger and bigger things to come your way. So this is really quite a big one. This is, probably one of the most abused medicines in the world are antibiotics. So my advice to you here is just, when you're talking with your doctor about whether you need one, you just make sure that you have the conversation to say, okay, is this absolutely necessary? Do I actually have a bacterial infection that this antibiotic is going to treat? Because a lot of doctors just give the antibiotic and say, just in case, take it, right? This is especially true in the field of dentistry. When they're going to work on your teeth, they say, let's give you prophylactic antibiotics just in case. Like those, in my opinion, those aren't great ideas, and that's a conversation you should have with that doctor. Don't just indiscriminately use antibiotics. It can have long-lasting impacts and effects on your health. Remember, when you did knock out your normal flora, that's one of your primary immune barriers. And so really, I'm going to make some room up here. Your immune barriers are critical. So those of you who aren't aware of your immune barriers, you've got several of them in your gut. Remember, depending on what research paper you read, between 70 and 80% of your immune system is in your GI tract. And it has a name. It's called the GALT, gastro-associated lymphoid tissue. It's like a big, huge set of tonsils that wraps around your small intestine. And so it's a concentration of lymphoid tissue that's there, armed and ready to go should you eat something that your immune system needs to protect you from. And again, remember your gut, there's a chronic battle that's always occurring between what you put in your mouth and your immune system. And that's because, remember, your immune system is largely concentrated here, because it's the job of the gut is to quarantine potential bad guys so you can poop them out and allow good guys to come in. That's why we have so much immune power there. So this is why when people eat things they're allergic to, or eat garbage food, or eat food full of processing and preservatives and genetically modified foods and pesticides, like their immune system becomes overwhelmed. And when your immune system is overwhelmed, it can't fight for you. So if you come into exposure with a bacteria or virus or something like that, it's a lot harder for your immune system to give you what you need to win that battle, because what you're doing to your immune system is you're working it overtime by subjecting it to different toxins through what you eat. So remember, the GI tract, very, very important part of that. And so the stomach acid is one of your barriers. Mucus is one of your barriers. So, again, I talked earlier about mucosal immunity. That's part of what your mucosal immunity is. It's the mucus production in your gut. And then you have something in your gut called tight junctions. Tight junctions are one of your barriers. Your good bacteria, or your microbiome, let's just not say good bacteria, because your microbiome, it's really consistent of not just bacteria, but you have good fungus in your microbiome. You have all different kinds of things in your microbiome that are living creatures that are there to help you and that live in harmony with you. So these are your primary barriers within your GI tract that help support your immune system. So when you take a steroid, one of the things that you do is you erode the mucus production. When you take allergy medicines and antacids, you erode the acid production. When you take gluten and other foods that you're allergic to or reactive to, when you eat pesticides and chemicals in general, you can destroy your tight junctions. When you take antibiotics chronically, you can destroy your microbiome. So you can see how real easy it would be to overload your immune system, especially within your gut, if you were doing these things on a consistent of enough basis long term. That's where we get into trouble. It's not the, hey, I took an allergy medicine once last year because they were really bad. That's not what I'm talking about here. I took an antibiotic because I had 104 fever and I had a major infection that was going to kill me. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the indiscriminate use of these drugs for long periods of time without getting with your doctor to ask a deeper question, which is why am I on all these medications indefinitely? Is there a way to get off of them? What kinds of things do we need to look at doing in order to move me in the right direction? Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.